Chief Vann is a man who has been unfairly vilified by modern-day historians to the point where his original gravestone read something to the effect of, "Here lies James Vann, who killed many a white man, and at last by musket ball he fell, and the devils dragged him down to hell." Chief Vann was not a particularly bad man, all things considered, and did a lot to help his tribe. He was born sometime in the 1760s, the child of a white fur trapper and a Cherokee mother, and grew up within the Cherokee, which was a matrilineal system, so he gained everything belonging to his mother, who was, by all accounts, a very popular woman. And around the time of his youth, it was the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, and both the Muskogee Creek and the Cherokee had been formerly allied with the British, and now that the British are gone, their main suppliers are gone, and colonists are beginning to settle up over the Appalachians, overhunting, breaking the earlier treaties that they had signed as colonialists, and basically wiping out the Cherokee and the Creek. There were famines. So by 1793, as a young man, James Vann joined an expedition up to White's Fort, which was the capital of Tennessee. On this expedition, which was led by Major Ridge, you had about 1,500 Creek and Cherokee, and initially their plan was to besiege the fort and kill the militiamen. However, there was a more conservative chief on that mission named Doublehead, and Doublehead said, "We need to kill every man, woman, and child to send a message," and most people objected to this. However, they reached a local station, surrounded it, and got them to surrender without firing a shot, with the promise that nobody would be harmed. And so, as they come out with their hands up, Doublehead leads a contingent to begin killing all of the women and children. And James Vann picks up a young boy and tries to put him on the back of his horse and covers him with a blanket, but Chief Doublehead sees this happen, runs up with an axe and caves the boy's skull in. Later that day, James Vann discovers a boy hiding behind a tree and puts him in his tent to try to hide him. Well, Doublehead actually ratted this boy out and told another Creek chief to go and bring him back the scalp. So this boy again is tortured and scalped. So James Vann, from that point on, began referring to Cherokee Chief Doublehead as Chief Baby Killer, and this rivalry would last for many years. Eventually, James Vann would make peace with the white settlers, and the more moderate Cherokee, who were in favor of acculturation, were basically a triumvirate leading the Cherokee National Council. You had James Vann, Charles Hick, and Major Ridge, and these three men were referred to as the Young Chiefs. They were mostly mixed, Scots, Irish, and Cherokee, and they also advocated for overthrowing the older, pure-blooded, and more oligarchical chiefs like Doublehead. And again, this rivalry existed, and it basically split the Cherokee into two divisions, much like the Creek were split between Red Stick and White Stick. And in 1807, James Vann went and advocated that they go and assassinate Doublehead, who was causing a lot of problems for the acculturation, the pro-acculturation Cherokee. And they sent out Major Ridge and a man named Alexander to carry out the assassination. But because the Cherokee were in favor of ending blood feuds within your own families, they wanted to send out James Vann, but James Vann was too drunk at the meeting to go and do it. And so a couple of years pass after Doublehead has been assassinated, and James Vann is waylaid, killed on the side of the road by who we don't know, but a lot of people conjecture that it was that killer that was put up to it by James Vann at the Cherokee Council, Alexander, who resented the fact that Vann had proposed it but was too drunk to go, knowing that they would send a younger warrior like himself. Nobody ever discovered who killed James Vann, but James Vann understood that without a degree of acculturation, his people would be wiped out, that Great Britain wasn't coming back to help, and that they needed to collaborate with the whites. Unfortunately, he had collaborated to such a point that he laid the groundwork for Indian removal. In fact, he was both waylaid and buried beside the old federal road that would be used for the Trail of Tears only a couple decades later. After trying to assimilate with white settlers and forming the Cherokee triumvirate of Charles Hicks, Major Ridge, and himself, James Vann invited the Moravians and settled down into a more affluent way of life. He actually may have been the richest man on the continent at the time because of his modernization programs, which included the old federal road here behind me. And he settled into a very comfortable way of life, operating taverns and river crossings, including Vann's Tavern, and settled down into a way of life pretty similar to Chief Macintosh before he was killed, again, very soon after signing away the Creek Nation and forcing his tribe into Alabama. And there is James Vann's grave, and surrounding me is the Blackburn family cemetery. Early settlers and pioneers in the area, in fact, Find a Grave only lists 11 known memorials, but if I pan around, this is an entire field of people whose lives we will never know until we reach the great beyond.